When I got the job, I thought it was my chance to get back on my feet. The school was isolated, surrounded by dense forest, with only a dirt road leading to it. The interview had been oddly simple, almost casual. You just need to follow the rules, they told me with a smile that, looking back, I realized was forced. Upon arriving, the first thing I noticed was the building, an old structure with gargoyles at the ends of the roof and windows that seemed dark even under the midday sun. There was nothing inviting about the place, but a job was a job, and I needed the money. The principal, a tall woman with a gaze as cold as the wind blowing around the school, was the one who handed me the list of rules. Read carefully and obey every one of them. Your safety depends on it. She stressed safety in a way that made me nervously laugh. But I quickly realized she wasn't joking. 1. Never make direct eye contact with the students for more than 3 seconds. 2. Always knock twice before entering any room, even if you know it's empty. 3. Never, under any circumstances, enter the school after sunset. 4. If you hear a voice calling your name in the hallway, ignore it. 5. Do not leave your room between midnight and 3 a.m. 6. Never touch locker 108. 7. If a student hands you an apple, politely refuse and go to the principal immediately. I read the list twice, hoping it was a joke. It wasn't. I asked the principal about the rules, but she just answered, "You'll understand in time." That sentence echoed in my mind as I walked down the hallways. The students were different. Some seemed normal at first glance, but there was something off about their eyes, a strange gleam that made me uneasy. Others didn't even try to hide it. They had skin that was too pale, hands with claws, or a peculiar scent I couldn't identify. On my first day, I tried to follow the rules to the letter, but how could I ignore the growing discomfort everything was causing me? When I knocked twice on the door of an apparently empty room, I heard something scratching at the wood from the inside. I didn't open it. My curiosity almost betrayed me more than once, especially when I saw locker 108. It looked ordinary, old and worn by time, but it radiated a presence that made me avoid looking directly at it. That night, while organizing my materials, I heard someone calling my name in the hallway. The voice was familiar, but I knew no one else should be there. My heart raced. I ignored it and kept working, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was standing outside waiting. Lying down to sleep that night was harder than I expected. The principal's words echoed in my mind. Your safety depends on this. I still didn't know exactly what that meant, but one thing was clear. This place held secrets I wasn't prepared to uncover. On the second day, I realized the list of rules wasn't just a quirky formality, but a survival guide. The students continued to make me uneasy, especially those who seemed to move too quickly, as if they could cross an entire hallway in the blink of an eye. I made sure to avoid staring at them for more than 3 seconds, as rule number 1 clearly stated. But that precaution didn't ease the constant chill that ran down my spine. During one class, a seemingly normal student dropped an apple onto my desk. Reflexively, I picked it up and handed it back. He just smiled, a wide, unsettling grin that seemed to split his face in two. Later, I remembered rule number 7. Never accept an apple from a student. I tried to justify it to myself. It wasn't exactly a gift, right? I had just given back what was his. But that night, I had my first glimpse of the consequences. I was finishing organizing some papers when the sound of something heavy dragging echoed down the hallway. I looked at the clock, 11:45 p.m. There were still 15 minutes left until the forbidden zone between midnight and 3 a.m., but the sound felt like a warning. I ignored the inner voice telling me to stay in my room. I opened the office door and peered into the hallway. There it was. The apple the student had given me, now on the floor, slowly spinning. No one was around, but the air felt thick, almost suffocating. I quickly went back to my room and locked the door behind me. When the clock struck midnight, I heard footsteps. Heavy, slow, dragging steps moving back and forth in the hallway. I didn't open the door. I didn't peek through the crack. I just waited, holding my breath. The next morning, I decided to ask the principal about locker 108. "It's better not to talk about it," she said, her tone closing the conversation. However, later, as I walked through the hallways, I noticed something strange. The lockers seemed to move. At the start of the day, it was near the music room, but by the afternoon, I found it on the opposite side of the hall. I decided to keep an eye on it from a distance. There was nothing special about it, except for the fact that the students avoided passing near it. In fact, one of the bolder students, who always teased his classmates, hesitated before getting close. "Don't look too long," he murmured, but not to me. It was like he was warning himself. The rules seemed more and more like an impossible riddle to solve. That night, as I worked in my room, I heard the voice calling my name again. This time, it sounded different, as if coming from multiple directions at once. My eyes were drawn to the crack under the door. Shadows moved erratically, as if something or someone was standing there, waiting for me to make the mistake of opening it. "It's not real," I whispered to myself. "It's not real." But the voice grew louder, more insistent. "We know you're in there." I stayed completely still until the sound stopped. Only then did I dare to breathe deeply. It felt as if the school was testing my resolve, waiting for the moment I would break another rule. The next day, a new student appeared. He was different from the others. His eyes were hollow, as if he hadn't slept in years, and his voice was a barely audible whisper. "Have you seen the old list?" he asked, leaning over my desk. Before I could answer, he stepped back, disappearing into the crowd of students. The old list? Did that mean the rules had changed? Or worse, evolved? Now I knew I wasn't just fighting the unknown. There was a greater force controlling this place, and I needed to find out who or what was behind it. After my encounter with the mysterious student, my mind couldn't let go of his words. The old list. Was it possible there was something even more disturbing hidden within the walls of the school? And the locker 108? Something inside me told me the two were connected. That afternoon, I found myself standing in front of the locker again. It wasn't where I had last seen it. Now, it was at the end of a dark hallway near the library. Curiosity gnawed at me, but the memory of rule number 4 echoed in my mind. Don't try to open locker 108, no matter where it is. I decided to take another approach. While no one was around, I crouched down and tried to peer through the crack in the locker. There was something inside, but I couldn't tell what it was. It seemed to pulse, like a heart beating slowly, and a muffled sound, almost like breathing, could be heard if I concentrated hard enough. Before I could pull away, I felt a coldness slice through the air. Something, or someone, was standing behind me. I didn't need to look to know. A long shadow passed over me, and then I heard a whisper. "You're closer than you should be." When I turned around, there was no one there. That night, rule number 2 was put to the test. Between midnight and 3 a.m., do not leave your room, no matter what you hear. And of course, as if the universe wanted to test my resolve. At exactly midnight, the sound began. At first, it was footsteps, the same dragging rhythm I had heard before. Then, voices, more than one, talking among themselves. They weren't clear, but fragments of words reached me. He's here, he doesn't know yet. Too curious. I swallowed hard. This couldn't be real. I covered my head with the pillow, but the sounds grew louder, almost as if they were inside my room. Then, 3 knocks on the door, strong and impatient. Thud, thud, thud. My eyes widened, and the air seemed to vanish from my lungs. I didn't move a muscle. The knocking continued. I knew I couldn't open it, but every second felt like an eternity. The knocking ceased, but the relief was brief. When I looked at the crack under the door, I saw something strange. They weren't just shadows. They looked like hands, impossibly long and thin, dragging across the hallway floor. A low, distorted laugh echoed, fading as the hands moved away. When dawn finally broke, I was exhausted, but relieved to have survived the night. The next day, I decided to confront the headmistress. I needed answers. This school isn't normal, I said, trying to control my voice. These rules, what do they really mean? Why are they here? She looked at me with a tired expression, as if she were carrying an invisible weight. You need to understand that the rules aren't just guidelines. They're contracts. They keep us safe. And more importantly, they keep them contained. Who are them? I insisted. She hesitated. But before she could respond, the bell rang, and the room was flooded with the sound of students heading to their classes. She stood up and with a tone that sounded more like a warning, said, "If you keep asking questions, I won't be able to protect you." I was left with more questions than answers, but one thing was clear. These rules existed for a reason, and breaking them could mean something much worse than I could imagine. Later, as I organized materials in the classroom, I found a note stuck to my desk. It was handwritten with shaky letters. "They're watching. Don't trust anyone." I looked around, but there was no one nearby. Who had left this? And who were they? The feeling of being watched intensified. It was as if the school were alive, each of my movements carefully monitored. And deep down, I knew I was getting closer to something that was probably better left buried. The words from the note echoed in my mind. "They're watching. Don't trust anyone." What did it mean? Who were they? It was clear that something, or someone, wanted me to know more than I was allowed, but every time I tried to understand, it felt as though the walls of the school were closing in around me. That night, I received an unexpected message on my phone. It was from an unknown number with just 2 words, auditorium. Now, rule number 6 warned, never enter the auditorium after sunset. But something inside me told me that ignoring the call would be more dangerous than following the rule. With shaky hands, I left my room and walked through the hallways. The school felt darker than usual, as if it was testing me. When I reached the auditorium, I cautiously pushed open the door. Inside, it was empty or almost. In the center of the stage, there was a circle of candles, burning with an unusual flame, a pale hue that seemed to consume the light around it. Sitting in chairs around the circle were 6 students. I recognized some of them as those who seemed different, like the pale boy who had confronted me in the hallway. They didn't say anything when I walked in. They just stared at me, as if waiting for something. Finally, the pale boy stood up and spoke. "You broke the first rule, didn't you? No wonder they chose you." My throat went dry. "What do you mean by chose?" He didn't answer. Instead, he extended his hand, pointing to the circle of candles. "You've seen enough to understand that these rules aren't random. But to know more, you need to see for yourself. Are you ready to cross?" "Cross? Cross what?" I asked. Another student spoke, his voice so low it seemed like a whisper. "The threshold. To their side. Only then will you understand." I wanted to refuse to leave, to pretend none of this was happening, but my feet wouldn't obey. Something invisible seemed to pull me toward the circle of candles. As I stepped into the circle, the air around me changed. It became heavier, denser. I closed my eyes for a second, and when I opened them again, I was no longer in the auditorium. I was in the school hallway, but it looked distorted, as if I were submerged in a feverish dream. The walls were covered with symbols, the same ones I'd seen carved into desks and doors over the past few days. Voices echoed in the distance, fragmented words mixed with childish laughter and muffled screams. Then I saw them. They were shadows, human-like figures crawling along the walls and floor. They weren't students nor teachers. They were something older, hungrier. One of them approached, and I could feel its presence like an overwhelming pressure against my chest. Its voice was like broken glass. "Do you dare challenge us?" I wanted to answer, but my voice wouldn't come out. The creature tilted its head, studying me with curiosity, before whispering, "Welcome to the game, mortal. The rules won't protect you forever." When I snapped back to reality, I was lying on the floor of the auditorium. The candles had gone out, and the students were gone. It was just me, the darkness, and the terrifying certainty that I was now involved in something I couldn't escape. In my hand, there was another note, written in shaky letters with dark smudges. It read, "You've crossed the threshold. Now." The rules are just suggestions. A chill ran down my spine. I didn't know what was worse, the rules or what happened when they no longer mattered. The days that followed the meeting in the auditorium were a waking nightmare. The rules, once a rigid set of guidelines for survival, now seemed to toy with me. Doors that were supposed to stay closed open on their own. Schedules and routines were suddenly altered without warning. Most terrifying of all, the students started avoiding me. Even those who had been friendly seemed wary, as if something about me had changed. There was only one person who still spoke to me. Ellie, the monitor who had warned me about the note in the library. She found me at lunchtime, pulling me into a secluded corner. "What did you do in the auditorium?" she asked, her voice heavy with urgency. I told her everything, about the circle, the shadows, the note I received when I came back. As I spoke, her face grew paler. "You crossed the threshold?" She whispered. "What does that mean?" I asked. Ellie looked at me, her eyes filled with fear. "It means they know who you are now. The rules won't protect you anymore, because you've seen what's beyond them. You're in a dangerous game, and I don't know if there's a way out." Ellie explained that the rules weren't just guidelines to maintain order in the school. They were ancient pacts, created to keep a barrier between them and us. They, as she called them, were the entities that inhabited the school, older than any teacher or principal. They were the true owners of that place, and the rules were an agreement to make sure they didn't cross over into our side. But by crossing the threshold, I had broken that pact. Now, the entities could see me, and worse, interact with me. So what do I do? How do I make the stop? I asked, my voice trembling. Ellie hesitated, but finally answered, "There's a way, but it won't be easy. You need to find the Guardian." According to Ellie, the Guardian was a mysterious figure with the power to restore balance between our world and theirs. He was the only one who could help me fix my violation of the rules. But there was a problem. No one knew who or what the Guardian was. Only that he was hidden somewhere in the school, protected by riddles and traps. You'll have to follow the clues, but be careful. The closer you get to the Guardian, the more they will try to stop you. They don't want you to fix this. Before I could respond, something strange happened. The light above us began to flicker violently, and a cold laugh echoed down the hallway. Ellie grabbed my arm. "They're coming. You need to go now." I ran without looking back, my heart pounding in my chest. The school seemed more labyrinthine than ever. Hallways that used to lead to classrooms now ended in dead ends. Doors slammed shut on their own whenever I tried to use them. Finally, I found refuge in the library. As I caught my breath, something caught my attention. A page from a book was open on a nearby table, with letters highlighted in red. The Guardian sees where the rules are made. I looked around, trying to make sense of it. Where are the rules made? Then it hit me. The principal's office. It was the only place that made sense. But before I could leave, I felt an inexplicable chill behind me. A shadow materialized, tall and slender, its eyes like pits of darkness. "You shouldn't have broken the rules," it whispered, its voice scraping like broken glass. I ran. I reached the principal's office, locking the door behind me. Inside, the place seemed normal at first glance. But as I looked around, I noticed something strange. The walls were covered with old papers, each containing a different version of the rules. In the center of the room, a single chair was facing the wall. A cold, icy chill emanated from it, and something inside me told me I needed to look closer. As I approached, I heard a whisper coming from the chair. "Are you brave or foolish?" The chair spun on its own, revealing a man sitting in it, but his face was covered by a cracked porcelain mask. He was a guardian. I knew that before he even spoke. "You came seeking answers, but not all truths are a blessing." The masked man remained motionless in the chair, but his presence filled the entire room. His gaze, hidden behind the mask, seemed to pierce my soul. I could barely breathe, but I knew I couldn't hesitate. I broke the rules. "Now, they're hunting me. Can you help me?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The guardian tilted his head, as though evaluating my words. After an unsettling silence, he spoke. "I can help you, but everything has a price. Restoring balance requires a sacrifice. Are you willing to pay?" The word sacrifice echoed in my mind. I had no idea what he meant, but I had no choice. The alternative was far worse. "Yes. What do I need to do?" The guardian rose from the chair, the porcelain mask emitting a pale glow in the dim light of the room. He began to walk slowly, each step reverberating like thunder. "The rules were not made to protect you or any other human in this school," he began. "They are a prison, a way to contain the entities that inhabit this place. But by crossing the threshold, you freed them. Now, they want you." My throat went dry. "So, how do I fix this?" The guardian stopped, turning to face me. "There's an artifact hidden in the school, an object that contains the essence of the rules. If you find it and return it to its rightful place, balance will be restored. But the path to it is full of dangers, and time is against you. What happens if I don't make it in time?" He tilted his head again, his voice taking on a dark tone. "You'll become one of them. Not a student, not a teacher, something different." The guardian extended his hand toward me. In his palm was a small piece of paper with a trembled inscription, the last place where the rules were broken. Immediately, I thought of the auditorium. That's where I made my mistake. It had to be a sign. "Go," the guardian commanded. "But remember, they now know your intent. Every step you take toward the artifact will be a battle for your life." I took the paper, thanked him hastily, and left. The school was darker and more disorienting than ever. The walls seemed to breathe, and the floor creaked beneath my feet as if it were alive. Distant sounds echoed, whispers, laughter, and footsteps that weren't mine. As I neared the auditorium, the lights began to flicker. A thick fog appeared out of nowhere, making it difficult to see more than a few meters ahead. Suddenly, I felt something cold grab my ankle. I looked down and saw a skeletal hand emerging from the ground. I screamed and broke free, running as fast as I could. The shadows on the walls began to move, taking grotesque forms. Glowing eyes watched me, and familiar voices echoed around me. "You shouldn't have come. They'll catch you. Run while you can." But I kept going. I reached the auditorium almost out of breath. The circle I had drawn was still there, but now it looked burned into the floor, radiating dark energy. At the center of the circle, I saw the artifact, an ancient book, with a worn leather cover and inscriptions in a language I didn't recognize. As I approached, the air around me grew heavy, and an invisible force tried to push me back. I fought against it, stretching my hand toward the book. As soon as my fingers touched the cover, an explosion of energy coursed through my body. Memories and images flooded my mind. Teachers, students, monsters, and entities, all connected by the rules. But then I saw something that made me freeze. The rules were not just created to contain the entities. They were made to feed something much worse, something that had been waiting for this moment. The Guardian lied to you, a cold voice whispered in my mind. As I held the book, the ground around me began to crack open, releasing an intense red glow that seemed to emanate from deep within the earth. The cold whisper I'd heard before grew louder, turning into a cacophony of voices, all saying the same thing. Leave the book. Leave it with us. My hands were shaking, but I couldn't let go of the artifact. I knew I had crossed a point of no return, and if I didn't act fast, the entities would get me. But the doubt planted by the whisper kept eating at me. The Guardian lied to you. What did that mean? He told me that restoring the balance required returning the artifact to its place, but now I wasn't so sure anymore. I looked at the book, trying to decipher the symbols on the cover, but they moved as if they were alive. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows of the auditorium. The Guardian. He walked slowly toward me, his white mask glowing in the reddish light of the cracks. You found the artifact, he said calmly. Now, hand it over. There was something off about the Guardian's posture. He didn't seem relieved, nor concerned with the urgency of the situation. It was as if he'd been waiting for this moment for a long time. What happens if I give you the book? I asked, my voice wavering. The Guardian tilted his head, the gesture now familiar, but didn't respond. Instead, he silently extended his hand. The voices around me grew louder, now shouting, Don't trust him. He's deceived you. Open the book and see the truth. My heart raced. I was cornered between two terrible choices. Trust the Guardian or listen to the entities that had been trying to capture me from the start. With a swift motion, I decided to open the book. As soon as I did, an explosion of light filled the auditorium, revealing the truth. Inside the book, the pages didn't contain words, but images. Horrific visions of children, teachers, and entities being consumed by a dark force. At the center of it all stood the Guardian, not as a protector, but as the master of the rules, using them to trap souls and feed the school. It was then that I realized the Guardian didn't want to restore the balance. He wanted to use the artifact to complete the cycle, to renew the school's power and continue trapping more souls. The Guardian took a step forward, his mask now distorting, as if it were melting. His voice, once calm, turned into a grotesque roar. You shouldn't have opened the book. With the book still in my hands, I realized I only had one chance to escape. The rules were burned into my mind, and one of them, the last one, started to make sense. Those who control the rules, control the school. I knew what I had to do. Gripping the book tightly, I began to chant aloud what was written on the cover. The words were difficult to pronounce, almost as if they were forbidden, but with each syllable, the ground trembled more and more. The Guardian screamed, trying to stop me, but something invisible kept him from getting closer. The entities, now manifesting as shadows around me, also began to move, but not to attack me. They were attacking the Guardian. No, this can't happen, he roared, his mask finally cracking, revealing a horrible, distorted, inhuman face. With one final effort, I finished reciting the words. The book started to burn in my hands, but I didn't let go. The heat was unbearable, but something inside me told me I had to resist. The Guardian fell to his knees, his form beginning to dissolve into a black mist. The entity surrounded him, dragging him into the cracks in the ground. He screamed until he vanished completely. The school began to crumble around me. The walls shattered, and the darkness gave way to a bright, purifying light. When everything finally stopped, I found myself standing in the field where the school had been. There were no signs of the building, nor the entities, nor the guardian. The book had disappeared, and I was alone. A few weeks have passed since that day, but I still wake up in the middle of the night with the feeling that someone is watching me. The school was never rebuilt. To everyone, it was as if it had never existed. But I know the truth, and that truth haunts me. Deep down, I still wonder, did I really break the cycle? Or did I just become part of it?